It started like any other quiet evening in the small town of Millfield, a place where everyone thought they knew everyone. The kind of town where doors were left unlocked and secrets never stayed buried for long. Until one night, something happened that shattered that illusion forever. It wasn't just a murder, it was a story so dark, so tangled, that even the detectives who worked the case couldn't sleep for weeks after it was over. It all began on the night of October 14, 2012. At exactly 2:17 a.m., a panicked 911 call came in from a trembling voice, female, mid-20s, crying uncontrollably. "There's blood everywhere," she said. "He's not breathing." The dispatcher tried to calm her down, to get a name, an address, but all she could say was, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." When officers arrived just 7 minutes later, the house was silent. The front door was unlocked. Inside, they found the body of a man mid-30s, lying face down in the living room, his hands tied behind his back with what looked like silk ribbon. The victim's name was Daniel Mercer, a local photographer known for his charming personality and the way he seemed to make friends everywhere he went. But behind that easy smile, there were whispers. People said Daniel had a habit of getting too close to his subjects, especially the women. Some said he crossed lines, others said it was all rumor. But that night, all the gossip turned into evidence. In the kitchen, detectives found shattered glass, a broken phone, and blood smeared across the fridge. It looked like there had been a struggle. But oddly, nothing in the house was stolen. No sign of forced entry, no missing valuables. Whoever had done this knew Daniel. They had been let in. The only other person in the house was the caller, Lena Hart, a 26-year-old art student and Daniel's on-and-off girlfriend. She was found sitting on the kitchen floor, her hands shaking, her clothes stained with blood. But not all of it was his. When the paramedics tried to help her, she kept whispering one thing. "He said he forgave me." Detectives quickly realized this wasn't a simple case of passion or self-defense. There was something ritualistic about the way Daniel's body was positioned. His head tilted to the side, his eyes open, a small photograph placed neatly on his chest. It was a picture of him and Lena, smiling, taken just 2 weeks before his death. On the back of the photo, written in red ink, were the words, "Do you still love me?" Lena's story changed several times during questioning. First, she claimed they'd been attacked by an intruder. Then she said Daniel had tried to hurt her, and she fought back. But the physical evidence didn't support either version. There were no signs of an intruder, and Daniel's injuries showed he'd been restrained long before he died. The only fingerprints on the ribbons were hers. When detectives checked her phone, they found something even more disturbing. Dozens of unsent text messages to Daniel written over the course of several nights. Long, emotional paragraphs that swung between love and anger. "You don't see what you do to me," one read. "You make me feel invisible." Another said, "If I can't make you feel something, maybe I should stop trying." But one message, never sent, chilled them the most. "Tomorrow you'll finally listen." What no one knew then was that Lena had been keeping a secret diary. One she started the night she met Daniel at a photography exhibition. The journal, found hidden under her mattress days later, was filled with fragmented thoughts, sketches, and details about their relationship. But toward the end, the tone shifted. The entries became erratic, obsessed. She wrote about hearing voices in her dreams, about Daniel standing over her bed, about the fear that he was watching her even when he wasn't there. When the forensic team processed the scene, they discovered something small but crucial, a recorder hidden behind a bookshelf. It had captured the final 20 minutes of Daniel's life. The audio was muffled, but enough could be heard to piece together what happened. You could hear Lena's voice trembling, asking Daniel if he still loved her. He tries to calm her, tells her to put the knife down, then a crash, followed by silence. But the most haunting part came at the end. You can hear Lena whisper, almost gently, "Now you'll never leave me again." The evidence seemed undeniable, but the investigation took an unexpected turn when Lena's lawyer produced medical records showing she had been under psychiatric treatment for several years. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and dissociative episodes, She had been prescribed medication but reportedly stopped taking it months before Daniel's death. Her defense argued that she wasn't in control of her actions that night, that she had slipped into a state of psychosis, triggered by emotional trauma. The prosecutors, however, painted a different picture. They said this wasn't madness, it was manipulation. That Lena knew exactly what she was doing. They pointed to her internet searches. How long does it take to die from blood loss? What happens when you tie someone too tight? How to erase fingerprints from ribbon? Cold, calculated, and deliberate. The trial divided the town. Some saw Lena as a monster, others as a broken woman failed by the system. Every detail that came out made the story darker. The jury listened to the recording, the diary entries, the forensic reports. But the question wasn't just what happened. It was why. Why would a woman who claimed to love him so deeply commit such an act? The answer came from a final piece of evidence no one expected. A message left in Daniel's camera. Investigators found his digital camera in a drawer, its memory card intact. The last video clip, time-stamped just hours before his death, showed Daniel recording himself, his tone tired, defeated. "If anything happens to me," he said, "please understand, I tried to help her, but she doesn't want help. She wants control." When that video was played in court, you could feel the air leave the room. Even Lena looked confused, like she didn't remember any of it. Her expression flickered between shock and guilt, as if she was watching someone else's life play out. After weeks of testimony, the verdict finally came. The jury found Lena Hart guilty of second-degree murder, citing diminished responsibility due to mental illness. She was sentenced to 25 years in a psychiatric facility instead of a traditional prison. But even that didn't bring peace to the Mercer family, or the town. Because what happened next made everything even stranger. A year after the trial, Daniel's younger sister, Emma, started receiving anonymous letters in the mail. Each one contained a photograph, pictures that Daniel had taken, but altered. His face had been scratched out, replaced with red ink hearts, and at the bottom of each picture, a message: "He's still watching." At first, Emma thought the letters were some cruel prank. She tried to ignore them, even threw a few away, but they kept coming. Once a week, always on a Monday, always with that same message: "He's still watching." The postmarks were smudged, the handwriting inconsistent, but every envelope carried the faint scent of lavender, the same perfume Lena used to wear. Detectives reopened the file briefly, fearing someone connected to Lena might be behind it, but she was still locked away, under constant supervision. When questioned, Lena seemed genuinely confused. She said she didn't remember sending anything. She hadn't written a letter since her sentencing, but when officers checked her room, they found something disturbing. An entire wall covered with photographs cut from magazines, faces replaced with Daniel's, taped together in a mosaic of obsession. It wasn't just memory loss, it was fixation. Emma began to feel like she was being followed. She'd catch glimpses of someone standing across the street late at night, but when she looked again, they were gone. Her phone would ring once, then go silent. The calls were untraceable. Her friends told her to move, to leave Millfield behind, but she refused. She wanted to know the truth. One night, she decided to set a trap. She installed a motion-activated camera near her front porch, angled toward the mailbox. For days, nothing happened. Then, on the fourth night, the camera caught movement. A figure in a hooded coat walking slowly up the driveway carrying an envelope. But when investigators analyzed the footage, their jaws dropped. The person in the video looked exactly like Daniel Mercer. Of course that was impossible. Daniel had been dead for nearly 2 years. Yet the facial structure, the walk, the shape of his hands, it was all him. The detectives initially thought it was a deepfake or a setup. But the timestamp, the lighting, everything checked out. It was real footage. The figure left the letter, turned toward the camera, and whispered something before walking away. The audio was faint, almost drowned out by the wind. But when filtered and enhanced, one sentence came through. She wasn't the only one. That single line reopened the entire case. Who was she? What did he mean? Investigators began to look deeper into Daniel's past. His relationships, his work, his clients. What they found painted a very different picture of the man everyone thought they knew. Daniel had been photographing women for over a decade, mostly portraits and art projects, but hidden in one of his old hard drives were hundreds of photos that were never published. Pictures of his models taken without consent, some while they were unaware. In several images, the women appeared frightened, as if they had realized something was wrong too late. Among those photos was a familiar face, Lena, one of the earliest images of her, taken long before they started dating. She had been one of his subjects first. When detectives showed these photos to the prosecution team from the original case, everything shifted. Maybe Lena hadn't been the only unstable one. Maybe Daniel had been manipulating her from the start. Some of the messages she'd written in her diary about feeling watched, controlled, used, they didn't sound like delusions anymore. They sounded like memories. A forensic psychologist who reviewed Lena's writings suggested that she might have been both a victim and a perpetrator, that Daniel had pushed her to a breaking point with psychological games, only for the situation to spiral out of control. She didn't kill a stranger, the expert said. She killed her reflection of him, the version he made her believe she was. The chilling part: those anonymous letters to Emma contained DNA traces. Not from Lena, not from Daniel, from an unknown female profile. The results didn't match anyone in the system. It was as if the sender didn't exist. But then a new letter arrived, one different from all the others. This time, no photo, just a piece of paper with a message scrawled in red ink. "You think he's gone, but he taught me everything." The handwriting was matched to a woman named Mercer, a former photography assistant who had worked with Daniel years before his death. When police located her, she was living alone in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Her behavior was erratic, her room plastered with old photos of Daniel's work. When asked about the letters, she laughed and said, "He promised me I'd be remembered." Inside her room, investigators found evidence linking her to Daniel's personal archives. It turned out she had stolen several of his old memory cards after his death. Cards that contained the secret photos, the ones that never made it public. She had been the one sending the letters to Emma, not out of malice, but out of obsession. In her words, "I wanted them to know the truth, that he created monsters." But the strangest part came when they asked about the video, the one showing Daniel at Emma's house. Mercer claimed she didn't film it, but she knew who did. She said Daniel had an identical twin brother, something no one had ever mentioned before. His name was David Mercer, and he disappeared 10 years earlier after a falling out with Daniel over a shared photography project. Detectives initially dismissed it as another delusion, until they ran Daniel's DNA against a few unidentified samples from the scene of the letters. The results were shocking. It wasn't an exact match to Daniel. It was a 99.8% sibling match. David was real. Further investigation revealed that David Mercer had been living under a different name in another state for years. When police finally tracked him down, they discovered a man obsessed with his brother's death. In his small apartment were news clippings about the murder, court transcripts, and a wall covered with photos of Lena, Emma, and Mercer. He had been following the case from the shadows, convinced that his brother's story had been twisted by the media. During interrogation, David admitted to visiting Emma's home, leaving the letters and recording himself to send a message. But he denied ever threatening her. "I wanted her to see the whole truth," he said. "My brother wasn't the victim or the villain. He was both." The case finally closed with David's arrest on charges of stalking and evidence tampering. But even after the truth came out, nothing in Millfield felt the same. The story had gone from a simple murder to a labyrinth of obsession, guilt, and identity. Emma eventually left town, changed her name, and started over. Lena remained in the psychiatric facility, reportedly painting portraits of Daniel every day, saying she's trying to remember which face was real. Mercer was admitted to treatment after a mental breakdown, and David Mercer, he sits in prison now, spending his days writing a manuscript he calls The Mirror Between Us. To this day, no one really knows what he means by that title. Some think it's a confession, others believe it's just another layer in a story that never had a clean ending. But there's one thing everyone agrees on: The Mercer case isn't just about murder. It's about how love, when twisted by control and obsession, can turn into something unrecognizable, something that looks like devotion but breathes like darkness. And in the end, that's what makes it the most twisted murder case you've never heard of. Because it wasn't about who died, but about how far people will go to feel seen, even if it means destroying everything in the process.